Good morning, and thank you. Wow. After all the reading and the meditation, it's like, wait, do I have anything left here to add? I'll try. One thing, listening to Mike's song there, ordered to love them all, the connection of listening and love, like I just jotted down. Yes, love, but in order to love, the more you can listen, the more love you can find for somebody, to understand them. So that's listening to love, but then there's also, in order to listen deeply, it's good to have love to begin with. So it feeds on itself, listening and loving, I think. So there's not probably anything I'm going to say up here that you don't already know on some level, and that's good. But maybe I'll say something or put things together in a slightly different way that might be interesting. I think it's interesting to be just the fact of being up here talking about listening. It's a little contradictory somehow. So obviously, you're here, you all have some experience with listening. You seem to be paying attention to me and listening now. Thank you. And there's conversation, just social chit-chat, just being comfortable with other people. And part of that is talking, part of that is listening. And so you know how to do that, I believe. There's listening to your own inner wisdom. It's getting a little different type of deeper listening. Listening to your heart, your soul, your gut, connecting with the divine, listening to your guides, to God, to the divine, to the universe, whatever you want to call it. That's a type of deep listening, but it's not what I'm going to talk about today. It's useful, and there's an interplay. Actually, a quote that I had for years on my bulletin board in my room at home is from a book by Mary Stewart. Anyway, it's called "The God Does Not Speak to Those Who Have No Time to Listen." Imagine that. You have to take time. Of course, I've heard if one doesn't take the time to do it, sometimes God or the universe will smash you over the head and say, listen to this, or else. Anyway, so that's one type of listening. There's listening just to enjoy the sound. Often there are songs that I love the sound of, and it's like, wait, there are lyrics? Do I even care about the words? Not really. Or even just the sound of someone's voice can be beautiful just to listen to, regardless of the words. And of course, listening to nature, as Rob has told us. The birds, the squirrels, the leaves of the trees can be transformational as a way to just get our attention out of our own inner thought circulation. But why did I call this deep listening? Why talk about this at all? Obviously, what you heard already today gets at the root of it, the transformational, therapeutic, expansive power for the benefit of the speaker provided by just listening to them. And I came to this by years of studying and practicing and getting trained in something called applied metapsychology. It's a sort of a therapeutic technique one-on-one, and the training involves a lot of learning how to listen. That's the core piece. There's lots of cool techniques that go with it, traumatic incident reduction and unblocking, but none of that would work without the practitioner, the facilitator, understanding how to listen, how to just be there with another person without having their own crap, their own filters, their own prejudgments of, oh, this person is such and such a person, they said this, therefore they need to look at this, therefore they should think about this, therefore they need to do this. No, that's not what this is about. It's about helping the person find their own answers by listening to them. Because inside we have the answers. Whether it's what do you think of it as inside or in our higher self connected to the universe and divine, the answers are there. And if somebody tries to tell us the answers, that just adds another layer on top of all the confusion that's already there. So part of my training, I had to pair up with another trainee and trade sessions. And I've been doing that for, I guess I got certified in 2020, and so 3 years now, just about every week, I give her a session, she gives me a session, all on Zoom, and it's like, and she does this stuff professionally, so she has a lot more clients than I try to have, and if you want to read her story of her first 6 months of sessions with me, she has it out there on the web. Doorstohealing.com is her website. Doorstohealing.com. And I'll put that out in email after this. And she has a little thing in her menu says, from the other chair, because it's like her being in the client's chair for a change. It's kind of fun. So yeah, deep listening. And what I've seen as a practitioner, as a facilitator, people, especially once somebody has a clue how the process goes, I can ask a question, and 2 hours later, after a lot of listening, it's like they go down through their stuff, and then they find their way out. And it's like, and there's a big smile, maybe a realization, and another puzzle piece of their life has shifted and put it where they would like it to be in their jigsaw puzzle of their life, not me telling them where the piece should go. So that's why I do this. That's why I care about deep listening. One little piece of that, how this works. So there's the visible part of listening. You have two people, and there's one person either asks a question or just indicates receptivity, and the other person feels comfortable and safe and cared about enough to share deeply, not just social chit-chat, but it's like, okay, it's safe to dive into something that's really on my mind. Nobody's ever dared or bothered to listen to before. Here's my chance. And so there's, you ask a question and they do something, and then they speak and tell you stuff. And then to finish up that loop, there's you recognizing or hearing that they're done. You say, thank you, or I got that. Not having to add on any of your ideas of, oh, how horrible that was, or, oh my goodness, I couldn't have taken that, or just making it about yourself. Oh, that makes me so angry. No, that's irrelevant to helping the person you're listening to. It's fine in social conversation, but not if you're really trying to help somebody sort through their life. You don't want to add your own crap on their own crap. We all have enough of our own crap, from what I've seen and felt. Where's this? I got to play this. A few months ago, I'm connected with the group that does restorative justice things, and there was a webinar, and this woman talked about why she got into restorative justice, her own childhood experiences with sexual abuse with her father, and how that has stayed with her, and how she would like to have restorative justice even extend into that realm for perpetrators. But she had gone to India to visit her partner who was there on business or something, and she got really triggered by something. Somehow she got connected, or somebody suggested, well, the Dalai Lama might be helpful. And somehow she wangled an hour with the Dalai Lama, one-on-one. And this is what she
And so in that hour, eventually I was able to share, the depth of my suffering, and I was crying and yelling and telling him all about all the abuses that happened, gender-based violence, sexual violence, and His Holiness was an incredible listener. And so it was through actually having my story held in its totality by someone who came with zero judgment, both of me and of my father. While he was able to both hold that what my father did was absolutely wrong, he never demonized my father. And that was one of the first times I had ever had someone sit in the presence of my story, allowing me to have my reactions without putting their reaction on top of it.
Yeah, her name is Sujatha Baliga, something like that. So what she said there, one of the first times I had ever had someone sit in the presence of my story, allowing me to have my reactions without putting their reaction on top of it. How many of us could listen to something like that without maybe getting triggered ourselves and sharing our reactions with the person? That's what deep listening is. And yes, the more of our own crap that we can offload ahead of hearing something like that, the easier it is to be there with it, to be there with them just listening. So it's a combination of dealing with our own crap and training and practicing being able to set our whatever crap we have aside to focus without filters on the other human being in front of us. I forgot to say, if somebody wants to tell me when my time is up or getting close, feel free, because I know I tend to ramble. And I also hate it when people go long, so that applies to me too. Progress. Another little quote. This is from the book called Sabbath that Holly Makema did a study group on recently. Quote, "So I called an acquaintance, not a close friend, but a woman from church whom I respected, and asked her if she would go somewhere and pray with me, and she did. The two of us sat in the woods that afternoon as I poured out a long oral prayer to God. She responded with a prayer of her own. We must have spent 30 minutes in prayer, but at the end of it, I literally felt lighter. Literally felt lighter. That's one of the common things I experience as a facilitator with applied metapsychology stuff. You go through stuff, it gets heavy, you come out the other end, and I feel lighter. Anyway, continuing here. At the end of it, I literally felt lighter. I had passed on my burden to God and let go of it. Things were a little easier after that. I don't know why it was important for someone else to be there as witness and support, but it was." So she's acknowledging it was not just her in prayer connecting with God. It was having another human there as witness and support played an important role for her. Continuing, "When we are lost or afraid, we can tend to isolate, to bear down and get through it, to make it on our own. Jesus says, 'When two or more are gathered, there I am in your midst.' When we enter into companionship with another, something larger than ourselves is born." Now, I admit, at least any reading of the Bible I've found adds the quote is not just two or more gathered, but two or more gathered in my name. I personally believe that would not be something Jesus would say, that the Bible's been interpreted and translated and reinterpreted by all sorts of people. I tend to agree with Neil Douglas Klotz, who's an Aramaic scholar you heard about last week from Susan Slack in connection with the Dances of Universal Peace. It's not about gathered in the name of Jesus, or it's about gathered in the name of acceptance, what Jesus stood for, what he cared about, what he would want us to care about. Gathered in the name of acceptance, deeply compassionate listening, respect, love. And anyway, that's my take on that bit of the Bible, and most of what the Bible talks about. That's how I prefer to read it. So the idea of having two or more gathered, it's easy to think as us human beings, separate beings. We have this being, and this one can listen to this one. But I think the way I like to look at it that fits my experience is if you think of our energy spheres or our consciousness, it's like, yes, it's easy to see, oh, well, there's in my head, and there's this little thing in there called the amygdala that's like a surge protector for trauma, and it just tries to shield us from it, and it stores up all the crap, the angst and anger and sadness, and then it gets triggered and it spews it forth, trying to help us out. Anyway, so that's sort of inner focus, and Jennifer's meditation got to this a little bit, looking at, okay, the inner thoughts versus you can expand your awareness. What you're focused on can be your whole body. Yoga is good for getting out of your head and focusing on, oh, there's a body here, and it can touch things, and there's a bigger space that I'm in. It's not just my head and my thoughts. And there's also, I believe, when two people are open, there isn't sort of if you think of a Venn diagram, you got intersecting circles. There's an overlap of consciousness of beingness somehow. And when you're doing deep listening, I think of it as carrying my awareness, my consciousness is sort of enveloping the other person, holding them in safety and comfort. And I'm not doing anything to them. I'm not trying to read their mind or anything. It's just let them be what they want and need to be. And I'm just here, and they can find whatever support they can find from my presence can help them let go of outward focus and focus inward on what wants to be sorted out in their mind. And then they do that as long as it takes, and then they tell me what they found and what they looked at and what they're thinking about, and I'm just there listening. When they're done, I say, thank you. I might add, is there anything more you wanted to say about that? Or if I want to get really tricky, okay, so there's all sorts of techniques connected with this, but you might say, how have other people responded when you tried to share that? It's like, it's just sort of let them take that layer off of things, because all this stuff is in layers and it's network connected, and so it's just picking off one piece at a time. How am I doing? Okay. Is there anything else I really, really want to share here? I mean, I've talked about what gets in the way of deep listening. First of all, we aren't trained in it. Really, it isn't modeled for us in our lives usually. If they try to do it on some movie or something, it's all this psychoanalytic stuff of the therapist knowing better and guiding the person, and that's not what this is. So just not being exposed to it and learning how to do it is the first barrier. And then there's, of course, what I talked about, your own crap gets in the way. Our own preconceptions of who this other person is. We all have those filters. And then there's comparing that person to ourselves, and anyway, filters, crap, get that out of the way. It makes it easier to listen. Yeah. And yes, vulnerability. So to listen deeply, one has to be vulnerable enough to be in the presence of whatever that person is going to share with you, because it can be triggering. So, and for the person speaking, it's, how do I put it here? It's a whole other level of vulnerability to open up, oh yeah, in the presence of another live person, which makes it more effective for some people to fully let go of crap. So journaling, for example, is a wonderful tool. It can help you sort through stuff and connect with the divine, just meditative, contemplative, whatever. But to share that with another live person, it's like you have to be more vulnerable to be willing to share that with another human being. And that's like, that's hard. I never wanted to share that with anybody. I'm willing to write it down in my journal, but tell another person that I had these thoughts, that I did these things, that's a lot. But it's incredibly therapeutic if you can get there. There's that. Okay, one last story here. This is from someone named Joanna Popink. She did this as a paper and presentation in 1997 at the Chaos and Complexity as Theoretical Grounding. No, this was the name of it. Chaos and Complexity as Theoretical Grounding for Psychotherapeutic Listening. She had just gotten into chaos theory, and she was a brand new intern psychotherapist, and she was putting all this together. So when I was an intern working with young psychotics in a residential treatment center in 1977, I had a learning experience with a 25-year-old male patient. I was becoming adept in the use of guided imagery and thought I would offer this black-haired, open-faced, intelligent, psychotic young man an imagery experience. At this stage in my training, I had been taught not to use these methods with psychotics unless we were in a protected setting, and so I thought here was an opportunity for both of us. Some of you get the idea what's coming here. The imagery process I used at the time usually took 20 to 45 minutes. Young man and I sat under a tree in a lovely spring day in Los Angeles. He closed his eyes, and I suggested that he be in a meadow. In 90 seconds, this man whirled through a series of horrific misadventures, three-dimensional, vivid, technicolor, full of scents, sounds, and texture, with blood, murder, torture, and mayhem in full detail. I later wondered if his process was in any way similar to what people describe as their entire life passing before their eyes in a flash. In the moment, he took my breath away. Nothing I had been taught, nothing in my experience equipped me to process this material with him. He looked like he was in a state of alert shock after this sudden trauma. I said, drawing on I don't know what, okay, let's do it again. Except this time, we'll do it slowly. He said, oh no, I could never go through that again. I said, I'll be with you. We did it again, took about 30 minutes to review the terrain. He was more calm as he described the details of his sudden and terrifying experience. Then we parted. Because it was a residence, we were both still on the premises. A few hours later, he came looking for me. He looked serious, thoughtful, aware, and clear. He looked straight into my face and said, thank you. I looked at him, smiled, and quite seriously I asked, what are you thanking me for? He said, for staying with me. So the most basic key in working with someone was my ability to remain present for their experience. So thank you for staying present and deeply listening to this. Namaste.